to our webinar. This is Margaret Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Trumpeterswansociety, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. It's about trumpeting wetland conservation in British Columbia. And if we can have the next slide, please, just a few housekeeping details. Today's webinar is being recorded. You as participants are muted and your video is turned off. And we welcome your questions, and we want you to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer those at the end. And at the very end of the webinar, there's a very short survey that I'm very interested in and is really important to us. So I hope you'll fill that out. And then in 48 hours after the webinar, you will receive the recording. Before we get started, I want to introduce a few people from the Trumpeterswansociety who are with us today. Jim Hawkins is from the Yukon, and Marianne Coughlin is another board member. She'll be the one asking the questions you put into the Q&A box. Lisa LaFranco-Schoik is another one of our board members who's on here as well. And then the president of our board, Jeff Nelson, will just tell you a little bit about what the Trumpeterswansociety does before turning it over to our speakers today. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Margaret, and thanks everyone for attending. We realize people have lots of things going on, and we really appreciate your interest in what we're going to talk about today. Just a little bit about Trumpeterswansociety. We're a relatively small organization, started more than 50 years ago now, with a focus really on restoring trumpeters across their historic range. You may know they got down to virtually none in the lower 48, and so we've been working away at that, and really it's been quite a success. We continue to do some swan releases where populations still are below where they need to be, or birds haven't found their historic areas again. But we also have pretty good swan populations across the middle of the country in particular, both in Canada and in the US. What we do is, because we're small, is we really focus on partnering with many groups, including the Nature Trust of BC, who you'll hear from here today. But we work on trying to fund research that's needed to sort of guide restoration of the birds. And we also sometimes fund habitat work that, like the Nature Trust does in BC. We also have a fairly extensive communication education program. These webinars are part of that program, but we also produce materials for children and a variety of things that try to spread the word about trumpeters and the habitats that they depend on. We sometimes get involved with sign-on letters, particularly where there's threats to swan habitat or the birds themselves. And we also work on trying to prevent power line collisions and lead poisoning by reducing the amount of lead in the environment, and try to work with power companies when necessary, especially around important swan areas, to prevent the birds from colliding with power lines. So we do a whole variety of things. I don't want to go through it all, but a really good board of about 12 to 15 people, all kinds of backgrounds, geographically dispersed across the continent. So again, we're happy you're here today to listen in on what we're doing, and where the swans are depending on some of the work that the Nature Trust in BC is doing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jasper.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's a special privilege to be here on your webinar series. We're excited about the partnership we have with the Trumpeterswansociety to protect habitat for swans in BC, and appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of the work that we've been doing in BC over the last 53 years to put habitat, keep and restore and manage habitat here in BC. I'm going to turn it over to one of our former board members, distinguished ornithologist, scientist, wildlife artist, and all-around Renaissance man for birds and conservation science, Dr. Rob Butler. Rob served a full 8-year term on our board, led our biodiversity and land management committee of our board, and he's contributed in numerous ways to advancing bird conservation in BC and beyond. So Rob, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jasper, and welcome to the webinar. Jasper and I are in Vancouver, just north of Seattle in British Columbia. It's a beautiful sunny day here, good day to be talking about birds. What I wanted to really just introduce here, Jasper will go into the details about what the Nature Trust has been doing and the kind of work that relates to the trumpeter swans. But I just want to go back a little bit and just talk about the trumpeter swan as an icon for conservation success. One of the great things about the trumpeter swan is its recovery. And I just uncovered actually just a few days ago an old report from 166 years ago of the first European settlers that came into the Vancouver area. And they discovered a lake, and on the lake was over 100 swans. Well, soon after that, market hunting and so on started up in British Columbia as well as elsewhere on the coast. And we know what happened. The numbers of swans declined dramatically. Back in about the 1930s, I think the estimate was something like maybe around 70 swans were wintering in British Columbia. And one of the biologists at that time put it forward that this could be the end. We may not see them again unless something really important is done. And of course, we know that conservation action did start. And slowly, the swans have been making this comeback. And I remember as a young man going into the estuaries that Jasper will talk about here on our coast and seeing a few swans. And it was a big deal if you saw a swan or two in any of our estuaries. And it was such a delight to know that they were still alive when I was a young man. It took until sometime in about the 1980s when I got a job with the Canadian Wildlife Service and I was working out in the Delta, the Fraser River Delta, which is just south of Vancouver here. And it's one of the most important deltas in North America for migratory birds. And I remember vividly going out there one spring morning and hearing the first trumpeter swans coming in, flying in. There was about half a dozen of them bugling their calls. And I thought, they're trumpeting the success of the recovery. Because what had happened is that, with the controls on hunting, regulating hunting, and setting aside pieces of land, the swan was starting to make a comeback. And I think this is a message that we're finding that's really resonating with people. And it's something to think about in the broader context with what we're doing in conservation. A lot of the stories we hear through the media and so on are very dire. And people get very depressed around this. But we do have lots of stories that are successes. And they're being reviews now, looking at conservation programs around the world, and they're finding that the majority of them are successful and achieve what they intended to do. We don't hear much about them because they're a success. But the trumpeter swan is one of those that is so vivid. The swans are such an icon of this that we should be using this as an example of recovery. Here in Vancouver, about 10 years ago, seeing a humpback whale was a big deal. Now, there's over 100 identified individuals just on the waters just outside of Vancouver here. They're here all the time through the summer, and some of them are starting to stay for the winter. So that's recovered. We've seen the same thing with bald eagles, as we know, and many of the birds of prey that went through that demise because of largely due to DDT contamination of the eggs have recovered, and that's a success. And the trumpeter swan is another one of those examples. Just last year, we decided as a group of artists got together after a 40-year hiatus and decided we were going to all pitch in together and have another show. We held it at a center over on Vancouver Island, and we decided that rather than talking about the problems and the dire straits that some of our wildlife are in, let's talk about the positive ones like the trumpeter swan. And so we did. We made the whole theme the hope for future, that you can make a difference, that people can make a difference. It was a huge success. 70,000 people came to see it, and they responded very positively to this. They said they seldom hear these good news stories. So this is something to think about through the Trumpeterswansociety, that you have a great story to tell, that we can make a big difference in conservation. And I'd like to try to keep it simple for people. And I talk to them about the 3 Ps of conservation, that usually if you stop persecuting the animals, you stop polluting the animals, and you give them a place to live, they can do the rest. And in some cases, of course, we have to do other things, but for most species, that is the case. And in the case of the swan, that's what we did. Regulated hunting, There's some pollution issues, but some of those have been cleaned up. And as you'll hear from Jasper, we've been doing a lot to protect those important habitats for the swans. So think about this, that the swan could be a message, much bigger message than just protecting swans. It's something for people to get back motivated to really do something in conservation. And so I'm going to turn it over and let Jasper tell you about the great work that the Nature Trust has been doing over the last few years across our great province. And I hope that sometime soon you'll come and visit us. Okay, Jasper, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. I love your focus on the success story of conservation action. So one of the great drivers of bird conservation success in North America the last 40 plus years has been the joint ventures. And so I'm proud to serve on the boards of both the Pacific Birds Habitat and Canadian Intermountain joint ventures. And Pacific Birds Habitat is cross-border, just like our trumpeter swans, as we'll see today, are a wonderful shared cross-border resource. And recently joined the board of the Heart of the Rockies initiative, which is aiming to accelerate conservation in that cross-border Rocky Mountain region from Idaho and Montana up into BC and Alberta. So I've really focused on cross-border conservation and partnership-driven conservation as focus areas in my own career, and I've continued to have been excited about the potential of these conservation partnerships and the funding programs like NACA that drive them to advance conservation for swans and many other forms of biodiversity in our continent. So, as Rob mentioned, conserving species involves protecting the habitat where they live. And the Nature Trust has a history similar in duration to the Trumpeter Swan Society. We were launched back in 1971 to protect the biodiversity of BC. BC has amazing natural resources and the greatest diversity of species in our country. So for a northern country, we're blessed with an amazing abundance of birds and numerous other guilds of species. So our colleagues over at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have harnessed citizen science and eBird to help us get a better understanding of bird migrations. And so they kindly shared this graphic, which I will now play. Hopefully you can see how British Columbia, which is located right here, sandwiched in between Alaska, the Yukon, Alberta, Washington, Idaho, and Montana, is a key nexus for trumpeter swans. So if you'll watch the movements of swans up and down the flyways, you can see the significant role that BC plays in these movements between our two countries. And later on, if people are interested, I can show a similar graphic for tundra swans. So again, just a nice example of how we share these birds and responsibility for providing their breeding, migration, and wintering habitat so they can complete their life cycles. So moving along, the mission of the Nature Trust at BC is focused on three key tasks: securing ecologically important land, mainly through purchasing it. We also receive some donations of land. In Canada, we call those eco gifts. Restoration. More and more, we're finding that the lands that we purchase have had significant human impacts and so require habitat restoration. And then once we have purchased and protected and restored land, then we manage it forever. And we were launched in 1971, so some of our early acquisitions have now been managed by our staff for over 50 years. This is a recent shot of some of our staff on assignment in the field. There are organizations with similar names in other provinces, but we work only in British Columbia. We have a tradition dating back to the very beginning of having really outstanding scientists and business leaders on our board. And Rob is an exemplary um, example of that. The blend of business and science has really been a hallmark of the organization. In the early days, we had some of Canada's foremost biologists like Dr. Ian McTaggart-Cowan on our board. And since then, we've continued that tradition with folks like Rob, Dr. Peter Arcese, and most recently, Dr. Sally Otto, one of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award members. So with that leadership at the board, we also have a staff with expertise in conservation science, conservation land acquisition, management, and then the accounting and fundraising staff to help ensure that the donor dollars are secured and partner dollars are invested where they need to go, and we can run a effective, focused organization to deliver on our mission. So since 1971, we have protected over 500 parcels of land across the province of BC, totaling over 180,000 acres. And some of those acres are Lower Wolf Creek in this photo, and I can talk a little bit about that later because that's the project that we partnered with the Trumpeterswansociety. Unfortunately, when we sent the photographer out there with his drone, he found Canada geese, but no swans on that particular day. But I assure you that the swans do use Lower Wolf Creek, and I have a photo later today to prove it. So I'm going to share a visit to our web tool, which is available to all of you to enjoy on our website, naturetrust.bc.ca. And once I get this queued up, we are going to go on a quick tour of the 500 plus nature trusted BC conservation areas. And so here we go. Hopefully everyone now can see a map of British Columbia. Every black dot you see is a Nature Trust BC conservation complex. And you'll note that they are focused in a few key areas. In the southwest of BC, north of Seattle, and west of Vancouver, there's a large number of estuaries on the east coast of Vancouver Island. That's this giant island here in southwestern BC. So that's one of the places we'll be talking about today. As you move up the coast, following the track that some of our trumpeter swans take, you get up to an area near Terrace in the Skeena River watershed. So the Skeena River is one of the 3 largest river systems in BC, and there's a tributary of it called the Kitsum-Kalem River, which is renowned for having giant salmon, giant grizzly bears, and lots of trumpeter swans. So that's an area where we've been doing land securement for many decades. Just zooming in here, you can see at the top of the lake, and you can see these red polygons are Nature Trust BC conservation areas. So you can feel free to explore this tool in your free time, and you can see all the different landscapes over towards the Alberta border in the Peace River region. This is BC's portion of the Prairie Parkland landscape. We have a number of wetland conservation areas around Fort St. John, where we've worked with partners like Ducks Limited Canada to protect some freshwater marshes, bogs, etc., some of which are used by swans. Moving down south into the Amanika region and Prince George, which is the largest city in central northern BC. There's some large wetland complexes that we're building there that again are used by swans. So anyhow, just a fun tool to explore. If you're traveling in BC, then you can have a look and see what conservation areas might be in the area that you're traveling to. Okay, so I'm gonna flip back to my slides and let's see here. Okay, so selecting some of those key nature trust conservation areas for today's presentation, we're gonna first start in Southwest BC. I know some of you attended a recent swan conservation conference in Duncan, BC. So that is right next to Salmonos Flats, a nature trust conservation area, popular with trumpeter swans and the Cowichan River estuary. So this is the Cowichan River estuary. We've been assembling a conservation complex there with our partners at the province of BC and Ducks Unlimited Canada for over 4 decades. And right now, together, we're undertaking the largest estuary restoration project on Vancouver Island. We're working with Cowichan Tribes, which is the largest First Nation in BC, to restore estuarine plants and habitat functions in the tidal estuary there, and that will have benefits for the swans that use this landscape and restore indigenous food systems too. Nearby, I mentioned is Salmonos Flats. So this is at the edge of Salmonos Lake, which is another conservation area. And there's lots of hay fields and wetlands that are used extensively by trumpeter swans. And there's a great viewing tower here if you happen to be traveling through Duncan, where you can watch the swans. There's weekly swan counts done during the winter by local citizen scientists, and so there's a great records of the number both of migrant birds and overwintering birds that are using this landscape. Moving up Vancouver Island a bit, we see the Salmon River estuary, which is near the village of Sayward, and this is another landscape where we have been working to assemble and restore a complex of conservation lands. This photo was taken by one of our biologists, Curtis Rispin, in the Salmon River estuary, and this is just an example of the many estuaries on the
Excuse me,
east coast.
Jasper, we can't see your screen right now. We can only see
Oh.
you.
Oh,
Weird.
no, I see it. It's fine.
Oh, okay, it's just me
Yeah,
then. Okay,
It's
sorry.
just you. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully you should be able to see a flying swan in front of a log in the estuary right now. So we've just recently expanded this conservation complex by moving upstream, buying another 105 acres of habitat. So making this complex more resilient and providing more habitat connectivity. Pretty exciting work. Now I'm going to jump across the province to the Columbia River wetlands. The Columbia River wetlands are a pretty incredible landscape. The wetlands are located between the Rocky Mountains and the Purcell Mountains. The Columbia River at this point is up to 1 mile wide, and the Columbia River wetlands extend for about 100 miles. It's just a massive landscape of wetlands, and many of which have been protected by the province and the federal government, but there's lots of private lands that have not been protected, some of which are under threat. And so the Nature Trust of BC has been acquiring some of these private lands adjacent to the existing conservation areas to build that habitat connectivity, which and increase the resilience of this amazing wetland landscape to climate change, and providing connectivity for grizzly bears, which actually we've learned from telemetry studies are crossing this Columbia River Valley by traveling through the conservation areas that we've protected in order to avoid interactions with humans in the more developed part of the Columbia Valley. So a cool example of an apex predator using habitat that was protected in part to provide habitat for swans. The Columbia River wetlands, there's been extensive aerial surveys done, and in a single day, up to 1,000 swans, trumpeter and tundra combined, have been counted in the March-April period. So important area for migrating swans, and interestingly, some breeding trumpeter swans too. So the next message I want to share is just how each of you and all of us can get involved in helping to purchase and protect swan habitat here in BC. So this is another shot of the Columbia wetlands, an example of the types of habitats that can be conserved by buying them. This is the most recent project we've done in the Kootenay region, and this is the one where the Nature Trust of BC partnered with the Trumpeterswansociety and NACA, which I'm going to talk about in a sec, the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, to purchase this property. It's over 400 acres of diverse habitats, everything from natural wetlands to managed wetlands, riparian habitat, riverine, shoreline, grasslands, woodlands, forest. It's pretty remarkable diversity. It's important for waterfowl, as demonstrated by this. This is a Ducks Limited Canada managed wetland that was constructed beginning in the 1970s. So a previous landowner partnered with them to build this managed wetland. The swans do use this pretty extensively. The agreement with that landowner is now deceased. The agreement has expired, and so by buying this land, we can ensure that this habitat can continue to be managed for its conservation values. You can see the managed wetland in the middle of the screen, some of the forest in the foreground, and then beyond, heading out to the Wolf Creek and the Kootenay River. So vast landscape, important to huge numbers of species. This managed wetland, for example, is absolutely chock-a-block with western painted turtles. They're a species of special concern in Canada, and our staff have counted up to 90 western painted turtles at a time using this wetland. Another shot of the landscape here at Lower Wolf Creek. So provides habitat for swans and many other species. This particular parcel that we bought was 423 acres, and it's immediately adjacent to a parcel that the province of BC bought for conservation decades ago, which is about the same size. So together we've doubled the conservation complex on this side of Wolf Creek. And then if we cross over the Kootenay River, another land trust has bought another property for conservation. So building connectivity across the landscape, really exciting and really critical for grizzly bears. The grizzly bear biologist Michael Proctor has demonstrated that this is another key corridor, in addition to the Columbia wetlands, for grizzly bears moving across the landscape in this portion of the heart of the Rockies and the Yellowstone to Yukon region. So this is a photograph provided by the landowner to prove that yes, indeed, swans do use this habitat. So anyhow, magnificent landscape and a great example of what can be done through partnerships. Thanks to the Trumpeterswansociety who contributed $5,000 to this project. We matched that with a similar amount from Canadian donors, and then that was matched by NACA from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that turned into $20,000 US, so that's about 30,000 Canadian, and then the Canadian government matched that. So $5,000 at the Trumpeter Swan Society turned into $60,000 Canadian towards protecting this land forever. So thank you for that. And just a great example of how partnerships can drive conservation forward. So I mentioned NACA, North American Wetlands Conservation Act. This is a longstanding piece of legislation that was designed to help fund the implementation of the habitat components of the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. It was set up to be a international partnership. Some of the funds go to projects in Canada and Mexico, as well as the United States. Provides incredible leverage for donor dollars. It helps the migratory bird joint ventures to accelerate land conservation, habitat restoration, to help implement the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, the U.S. Shorebird Conservation Plan, and other conservation plans for migratory birds that depend on wetlands. So this really just provides a compelling leverage opportunity for folks to have more impact and make a tangible contribution to migratory bird conservation, whether it's shorebirds, or trumpeter swans, or hundreds of other species of birds that use the lands that NACA has protected. So here's a little video, helps.
The western sandpiper is the size of a teacup, but it flies more than 12,000 miles every year, all the way from Alaska to Peru. These little shorebirds, along with thousands of others, travel along the Pacific Flyway, a highway for migratory birds that stretches across the Americas. Birds stop to rest and eat along the way, crossing borders they don't know exist. But migratory bird habitat is disappearing in both the US and Canada. Nearly 3 billion North American birds have been lost from our skies since the 1970s. But there is hope. The Nature Trust of British Columbia is working to reverse habitat loss and protect migratory bird habitat forever. And we need your help. You can support us by donating through the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, a lifeline for migratory birds that recognizes that migratory birds know no boundaries, and conservation protection should do the same. When you donate as a U.S. taxpayer, your donation goes 3 times further, and you'll receive a U.S. tax receipt. A $100 donation is matched by Canadian funds, becoming $200. The $200 is matched again by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, becoming $400. This process is easy and quick. Simply donate through American Friends of Canadian Conservation, selecting the Nature Trust of BC as the recipient. It's a win-win for U.S. taxpayers, migratory birds, and the habitat they depend on. Learn more about the transformative impact of your donation on wetland ecosystems in BC at naturetrust.bc.ca. Triple your impact as a U.S. taxpayer today at conservebc.org.
So beg your forgiveness for showing a shorebird video, but I think you can see the parallels for the benefits to trumpeter and tundra swans from protecting habitat in BC along the flyways. So how can you help? Well, great way is just to spread the word about this opportunity. Tell your friends about what you heard today. Share the link. Margaret's going to send the recording out. If people want to watch this video, they might learn about this amazing conservation opportunity. Tell your friends about the leverage opportunity provided by NACA. Tell your congressional representatives to fully fund NACA. The appropriation process is underway, and hopefully the U.S. government sees fit to continue to invest in this incredibly effective conservation program, and continue to support the Trumpeter Swan Society so that they will have the funds to partner with organizations like the Nature Trust of BC to continue to advance conservation of swan habitat in British Columbia and beyond. So video, we mentioned the conservebc.org. That's a direct link to our American donation partnership program with American Friends. So check that out. And I'm excited to answer any questions you have. And Jim Hawkins has shared a really cool tool showing where Washington state swans are going in their migrations between Washington and the breeding grounds. And so I'm going to share that as well. And I was just absolutely fascinated to learn how these shared birds are moving across our province as they travel between Washington and the Yukon and Alaska. So thanks for your attention. Thanks for your support. Here's a QR code for Canadian attendees. That'll take us direct to our website. And again, Americans are encouraged to go to conservebc.org. So thanks for your attention. And here's the tundra swan video if anyone wants to see that animation of their migration. Meantime, I'm going to queue up the Washington State study so we can chat about the migrations of those birds.
And this is Margaret, and just while you guys are waiting for that, we certainly welcome your questions, so do put them in the Q&A box, and we'll be asking those in a little bit. Go ahead, Jasper.
Thanks, Margaret. So go to, so this is movebank.org, which is just learned about today, is a great resource for migratory bird studies. Can people see the map now? Margaret, can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay.
You have to share the screen. Yep.
Yeah, I thought I had shared it. Let's try
There
it
you
again.
go. Looks like it's going to start now.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. So some of you will know Kyle Sprague's at the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. He's actually the co-chair of the Pacific Birds Habitat joint venture that I spoke about earlier. And they put GPS collars on I think it was 19 trumpeter swans in the Skagit Valley, which is just across the border from the Vancouver area. And it's remarkable how we can see where these birds are going. So one of the opportunities that the Nature Trust of BC is pursuing right now is to purchase land in the, oh, that didn't work. I just screwed something up. Sorry about that. In the Harrison Valley, and that's one of the pathways that the Washington birds are taking on their migration. They leave Skagit and they head north to the Fraser River Valley and then head up to through the interior of BC and beyond. So somehow we've lost that map. I can try again.
Just zoom it out. There
You
you
can
go.
see the purple. There's a couple major pathways that they are traveling on. One of them is overflying the east coast of Vancouver Island, and all those estuaries that we talked about, where the Nature Trust has been working since the 1970s to purchase, restore, and protect estuary habitats like the Cowichan Estuary, Salmon Estuary, the Nanaimo River Estuary, and others.
I think you can zoom that in with the scroll wheel on your mouse, Jasper, if you want to, if you got a scroll wheel.
My mouse doesn't actually have one.
Okay.
Is there a different control on this?
There's a zoom somewhere. You can zoom up in the top bar there. Maybe that works. Anyhow, learning curve.
Movebank.org. Yeah, sorry about that. I had it working, but seemed to have lost the. There it is. Okay. All right. So this is the 49th parallel that currently separates our two countries, and You can see the birds are moving across the border. Some of them are moving up the Fraser River towards Hope, and some of them are moving up these across the Fraser, traveling up these lakes that run north-south and up into the interior. And what's interesting is that some of you will have heard of the Sumas Prairie in Abbotsford. The birds are overflying that area and seem to be spending quite a bit of time around. You can see all these blue tracks. Those are all where the birds are hanging out. And this is Nickerman Slough, which is an area where the Nature Trust has been acquiring land to build a complex for swans and other wildlife. So these birds are spending a lot of time in that area. And then on their way up north. So this is the city of Chilliwack. For people that might know this area, this is about 30 miles east of Vancouver. So can see the pathways as this is the interior migration path that some of them are taking. This is the Chilcotin region, another place where the Nature Trust has several major wetland complexes. And then they're moving up into the Amanika, where we've been buying more wetlands for conservation, and then heading up through northern BC, through the Yukon, and up into it's very remote parts of Alaska where they're breeding. So pretty cool study. And I can't wait to dive into this a little more. So kudos to Kyle Spraggins and his collaborators for helping us understand these amazing migrations. So have we got any questions yet?
We do. Yes. Hi, this is Marianne Coughlin with the Trumpeterswans Society. And our first question is saying that would like to speak with someone who monitors swan nesting in southeastern British Columbia after reintroducing trumpeters in the flathead drainage of northwestern Montana and currently monitoring nesting there. This listener would like to discuss swans north of the border. So how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I'm happy for them to contact me. We do not have a swan monitoring program ourselves. I can certainly reach out to some of our colleagues in the region and see if we can find someone. I'm not personally familiar with someone doing that work right now, but I'm happy to share my email address, or people can just go to our website. It's info@naturetrust.bc.ca with their questions, and that will be routed to the appropriate person. Yeah, Rob Butler, do you have any thoughts on who might be doing swan nest monitoring in Southeast BC?
Get my audio going here. I know some people that are up there doing bird counts, and so I can connect you to those people, and they can let you know if there's anybody doing specifically that kind of work. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And if anyone else has any questions, if they could please go ahead and answer them.
Yeah, this is Mark. I have a question for you, Jasper. So for all the work that y'all are doing, and I used to work in land conservation, how long does it typically take to do one of these protection projects? And is it easy or hard, or what's it like to talk with the landowners and gain their trust and get them to want to protect their property or have you purchase it? What's that like?
Great question, Margaret. I like to say that that land conservation takes 3 Ps, but these aren't the same 3 Ps that Rob Butler mentioned. Our 3 Ps are patience, persistence, and partnerships. And typically all 3 are required to get a given parcel of land protected. So Lower Wolf Creek, which is the one that we partnered with the Trumpeterswansociety on, is a great example. So we first received an inquiry from the landowner about 15 years ago. So the landowner invited our conservation land manager from the Kootenai region to visit the land. They visited it together. At that time, the landowner wasn't ready to move forward with a conservation project. So since then, sadly, the landowner has passed away and the Nature Trust conservation land manager retired and then passed away. And so the deal was eventually completed by the descendants of the landowner and by the next conservation land manager who had been hired and recruited and trained by our first land manager, Rob Neal, who initially made the landowner contact. So that's a decade and a half of patience and persistence before the project came together. And then the funding partnership had to come together to get the grant funds and the donor funds together to complete the project. So it definitely, it can be a long haul. Maybe the shortest I've ever seen it happen is 6 months if a landowner comes forward and wants to do a full donation and doesn't want to be paid except the tax receipt. That can happen relatively quickly, but I'd say more typical is 2 or 3 years. And if it's a large amount of fundraising that needs to take place, then certainly it can take longer. I should mention that for anyone who owns land in BC, that there are some very significant incentives for landowners to donate land to conservation organizations like the Nature Trust of BC. It's called the Federal Ecological Gifts Program. And we have worked with American families that own land in BC to protect their land forever and help them get some tax incentives for conserving their land.
Jasper, one other question before we get to any others. What would be the reasons why people would want to either protect it or have you purchase it? What are the reasons that motivate them to want to do that?
A lot of people just become very emotionally attached to their land and want to see the wildlife that they've appreciated, continuing to use the land. Some of the we work with one family up in northeastern BC who they're now in their 80s, but decades ago they saw significant private lands that were available for sale very inexpensively that they saw were under threat, and so they assembled their own personal portfolio of lands that they always intended to be conserved. And so they donated one of those properties, Little Living Lake, to the Nature Trust through the Ecological Gifts Program because they wanted to enjoy the tax benefits of conserving the land in their lifetime rather than leaving it to us in their estate. I think some families they want to leave a legacy. Near the Cowichan Valley, we worked with a family of a school teacher there, and the family had lived on the land and raised their children on the land, and the children had moved away. And after the parents passed away, the children just wanted the land protected as a legacy for the family. They named the land after the family and protected it forever. So I think that idea of creating a legacy, leaving land in its natural state, facilitating restoration, those are some of the drivers that we see. BC, we're seeing 100,000 to 200,000 people a year move to BC. So it produces intense pressure on the landscape, significant impacts on the ability of habitat to sustain wildlife like trumpeter swans. And so people see that, they see natural places that they grew up surrounded by being impacted by changes in human use of the land. And so they want to invest in protecting lands that are special to them.
Great, those are beautiful stories, and I think just seeing what the Move Bank has in terms of the movements of the swans, that they're probably going to some of your conserved properties, and that just speaks, to the importance of what you've accomplished, because you're actually providing habitat along the way, during the year for trumpeter swans and other migratory birds. So I think that, that's proof of the pudding for that. That's all. I think it's wonderful. Marianne, are there any other questions?
Yes, we do have other questions. If trumpeter swans are increasingly dependent on agricultural lands for winter foraging in British Columbia and adjacent areas of Washington State, does the Nature Trust get involved with agricultural lands?
Yes, we do. We have purchased some lands that are used for wildlife-friendly farming. One of the threats in the Lower Mainland of BC and on the Vancouver Island is the conversion of wildlife-friendly crops like hay, small grains, potatoes that are extensively used by swans, snow geese, and other waterfowl. It's the conversion of those to crops like nursery trees or berry crops, and which do not provide the same habitat values for birds. And so at Nickerman Slough, which was that very heavily utilized slough when we were looking at the Move Bank data, we were buying land there. One of the parcels of land we bought was a blueberry farm. And so we're in the process of removing the blueberries from that farm, which will facilitate more riparian restoration and wetland restoration to provide more habitat for swans and other waterfowl than the existing blueberry crops. So that threat of conversion to crops that don't sustain birds the same way can be neutralized by buying them. We do have an opportunity right now in the Harrison Valley, so we just need $1 million US. That's what the landowners are asking for, to purchase 90 acres of agricultural lands that are used by swans extensively in the winter. This is as cheap as it gets in the Fraser Valley. Is $1 million US for 90 acres, and so if anyone wants to see more swan habitat protected in an agricultural landscape, then by all means reach out anytime, and happy to give folks more information. But those landowners are very interested in selling, and the question is whether we can pull together a viable project there. First step is a lead donor.
Thank you. And those are our questions for today. We did have one audience member who suggested, back to the first question, about discussing swans north of the border. Another organization to check with would be BC Nature. And those are all of the questions in the chat.
Great. Well, thank you. And with that, I want to thank Jasper and Rob for your wonderful presentation. And what I think is really cool about this is we don't often talk about habitat as much as we talk about swans or swan behavior. So I think it's really important to understand the importance of habitat, and actually to recognize how habitat being protected is done through these different organizations. So I want to thank you guys for letting us hear that story, and certainly the wonderful reasons why people want to protect their land, and and thank you for the fine work, and thanks for all the wonderful things you said about the Trumpeter Swan Society too, Jasper. I really appreciate that. So it'll be the end of the webinar from now, but when you close out your browser, there will be a very brief survey that I hope you will fill out. I encourage you to fill out. It's pretty important. And then in 48 hours after now, you'll be receiving the recording once I have a chance to get it up on YouTube. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming, and for our speakers and for our panelists. It was a pleasure to have you here, and we'll hope to see you next time. Thank you.